All right, welcome everybody to creating your first app with Zendesk with the Zendesk App Framework. I'm Dave Dyson. I'm a community engagement specialist here at Zendesk, and joining me, we've got three folks here from the developer support team. We've got Erica Gurgis and Tiffany Hughes. I hope I've got your names right there. They will be our main presenters for today. They're developer support engineers. We also have Eric Nelson, who is the Senior Manager of Developer Support. And we also have Brett Bowser, my compatriot on the community engagement team with his little guy, Rory there. And we also have Krishna Dalal and Eric Shen, who will be helping to moderate questions that come in as well. Erica, you want to go ahead and share your screen with the presentation here? So I want to remind everybody that today's event is mainly a presentation on getting up and running with the Zendesk App Frameworks. We will be having an event next Thursday at the same time that will go over questions. I know a lot of you submitted questions as part of the registration process. We may be able to answer some questions as we go here today, but today's main focus is on the presentation and showing you how it's done. And then next week we'll be focusing on the questions. So hopefully you'll be able to join us there as well. This event and next week's event will be recorded. So if you're not able to make next week, go ahead and register anyway and look for the recording, and you'll be able to get an answer to all the questions that you've submitted there if we don't get to them today. All right, so Erica, Tiffany, why don't I hand it off to you? Oh, also, sorry, just a reminder, over on the right-hand side of your screen, you've got the chat tab and window over there. There's a general chat. You can say hello here. Everybody, say hi. Tell us where you're from, where you're dialing in from. I know we probably have a wide range of locations that people are dialing in from here. There's also a Q&A tab. So if you do have a question that you want to ask, please click Q&A over there and then ask your question there. That makes it easier for us to keep track of the questions and make sure that they do get answered, or at least recorded, so that we can answer them later. All right, so Erica, Tiffany, I'm going to hand it off to you. You're the experts. Let's hear about getting to know our Zendesk Apps Framework. Oh, and also, sorry, one more thing. Just want to say shout out to, we've got some of our Zendesk community moderators here, and I want to also give a shout out to all of our customers, especially our customers, our Zendesk support and sell customers, people who are subscribing to both our support product as well as our sales CRM. All right, now, Erica and Tiffany, I hand it off to you. Let's hear what you got.
Awesome. Thank you for that introduction. So today we're going to be getting into our coveted Zendesk App Framework, just kind of getting you set up and started here. But first, let's go ahead and introduce yourself, since both Tiffany and I are actually really new to this team. So,
alrighty, I'll kick it off. Hey everyone, I'm Tiffany, developer support engineer here at Zendesk. Super excited to be here today to talk to you about the Zendesk App Framework and to work through setting up an app using Zendesk App Scaffold and Next.js. A bit about myself first. I'm originally from New Zealand, as you can probably tell from the accent. My background is customer experience and advocacy, having worked in that space for over 5 years. With my background in customer-facing roles, I know how important it is to partner with our community who work with the products every day, and it's been really exciting to come into Zendesk developer space with a fresh pair of eyes, looking towards how we can work together in the community to provide the best developer experience possible. So I'm a self-taught developer working mainly with the front end, specifically React a bunch lately. Another reason why I'm excited for today. Over the past 2 years, long journey teaching myself programming. It's been a ton of exposure to different documentation, so I feel like it's really opened my eyes to how important documentation is and how it can literally make or break adoption of a product and retention of a user base. So with that in mind, it's been a lot of fun getting to learn the Zendesk developer platform, particularly since the release of our revamped docs. So there's a bit about me. Again, super excited for today.
hi, and I'm Erica. I actually also come from a background in customer support and account management. Honestly, I actually never really thought that I was smart enough to learn how to code, but I genuinely really did admire software engineers and everything that they did. Then I want to say early last year in 2020, I kind of realized that I just wasn't actually happy with what I was doing not that I didn't love helping people. I honestly really do love helping people. I just felt like I wasn't being challenged enough. So when like the lockdowns and like pandemic happened, I kind of just decided like, you know what, if I'm going to make like this massive career change, now would be the time. So I went ahead and I started Lambda School in July of 2020 for full stack web development and graduated in February of this year. I joined Zendesk developer support team in May of 2021. And honestly, it's just been the most like best experience for me. It kind of just like encompasses all of my skill set, because not only am I helping people, but I'm also helping developers like myself, and me still kind of being on this journey of continuously learning how to code. I definitely get the whole, like, it's sometimes hard to ask questions and ask for help. And so it's great to kind of be a part of building that community of people and just kind of being there for one another and, you know, sharing ideas and thoughts and providing feedback and giving us all those wonderful challenges that we absolutely adore. On a fun note, I'm also a mom of 2 wild children, and I also spend way too much money on anything Disney or Salem related. So with that said, let's go ahead and get into exactly what is developer support.
I think, Erica, you encapsulated that really well as well. You know, we're all here to help each other. So with that said, what is developer support? So like we said, we're here to help developers like you, and we're all about seeing the cool things that developers create with Zendesk software. As mentioned on the slide here, we know that not every company fits into the same box. So while today you'll see us covering the Zendesk App Framework, we're here to support you with a lot more than just that. Whether it's working with our APIs, SDKs, the Zendesk web widget or guide, we're here to help you. We spend the majority of our time in the Zendesk community as well. So if you ever have any questions or you just want to drop us a line, please make sure to come and see us in the community. Make it your first stop. We're here to help. Okay. And with that, let's get started.
So Tiffany and I both started at Zendesk without knowing much of anything about the products or the platform as a whole. This meant we had like a lot of learning to do, and we still have a lot of learning to do. But one of the main areas that the developer support team actually supports is our Zendesk App Framework. We figured the best way for us to learn all the ins and outs was to basically just build an app ourselves. We both have experience with React-based frameworks, and we kind of noticed that there was a lack of resources around kind of integrating that with ZAF. So today we did some of that legwork for you, and we kind of just want to take you step by step into just scaffolding up that app of using ZAF with Next.js. So let's go. We've essentially actually broken this up into 2 main segments. First, we're going to go ahead and cover just the basic Zendesk app scaffolding. And we're going to go ahead and also do a little bit of a deep dive into the various applications that you can have within our support platform. After that comes some of the interesting new stuff that we had learned. We're going to go ahead and show you how to set up your code base within your next app, and some changes that are going to be done within that Zendesk app for you as well. So let's get started with that Zendesk app scaffolding.
Cool. Zendesk app scaffolding and app locations. So why use the Zendesk app scaffold? That's a question that comes up. So the Zendesk app scaffold actually comes baked in with a lot of cool stuff to help you maintain and scale your app. Some of the features included in the app scaffold include the ES6 transpile Babel, module bundle webpack, and the Jest testing framework. Also included the Zendesk Garden UI components. These components can help keep your app consistent with apps in our marketplace. And usage of the Zendesk Garden components can actually help streamline the approval process for apps published in our marketplace as well. So it's really good if you can sort of use those in your app. Also a heads up that we will be introducing a new and improved Zendesk command line interface for working with Zendesk apps in the near future. The ZCLI is in beta at the moment though, so for the purposes of this webinar, we will be using the Zendesk App Tools or ZAF, but watch this space as we'll be coming to you with ZCLI content very soon. Alrighty, so setup. Let's start scaffolding our app. The first things I'll do here on this slide are just run through the commands, and then we'll get to live coding a little bit. So to start off, number 1, you're going to want to run this in your terminal. So ZAF new scaffold. That will get you up and running and ready to start building it up. The next thing that you're going to want to do after that is enter the app author's name in email. So it can be whatever you want, but probably your own name and email should suffice. This will appear in the manifest.json file in the app folder. The next thing you're going to want to do is enter the app author's URL. Now, this can point to like company website or an app website if you have it. It can also be left blank, and you can update it at a later time if you like. In this case, we're going to leave it blank. Then the next thing you're going to want to do is enter a name for your app. So this will also appear in the manifest.json file. Again, you can change that at a later time as well. And then the final thing you're going to want to do is enter a folder name for your app. So if that doesn't already exist, we'll go ahead and create a new directory for your app, so whichever works best for you. So that's essentially the basics of getting your app scaffold up and running. And we'll jump into some live code and see how it works. Alrighty, so first things first, we'll go ahead and that new scaffold. Alrighty, so we'll go ahead and enter the name, good old JDO. Let's get our email in there. And like I said previously, for this example, we can just leave this blank. So we'll go ahead and leave that blank. And we'll enter a name. So in this instance, we'll call it ZAF test. And we'll enter a directory. I don't have one pre-prepared for this, so this will create a new directory in our folder here. And there we go. And that's as simple as that, really. That's all you need to do when you're up and running. So Erica, if you just want to click that folder open, we can see the folder structure there as well. It's got all that good stuff ready to go. Now, once you've completed this, you may want to see it in action in your Zendesk instance. So the next thing we'll go ahead and do is get this running in dev mode. It's not coming up there, is it, Erica?
You're in the server, right?
If you could just bring up the slide, I'll just run through that.
Sure. Sorry.
All right, cool. So once you've got the app all set up and we're ready to go, essentially we just have a few more commands to go through that will get it live in your Zendesk instance. So we're wanting to set up the ZAF server, all that good stuff. So the first thing we'll do is npm install just to get all our dependencies installed and up and running. Standard stuff. The next thing we'll do is run npm run watch. Now what that will do is create a disk folder for us and watch it for any changes. Once we've done that, then we'll go ahead and run ZAF server pointing to the disk folder. That will essentially get it pointing towards our Zendesk instance. And then the last thing that you'll want to do, and you'll see here on the bottom right of this slide as well, is just append the ZAF equals true to the end of your URL, and that will make sure that it's picking up the correct stuff. Cool. So again, we'll go ahead and do this live here. Now, for the purposes of this walkthrough, we've actually pre-prepared a file, so you haven't wait for the npm install dependencies to run. So we'll just go ahead and do this here. Now, since we have the dependencies, we can just go npm run watch. Let me just get into here. Alrighty, so that's now watching for any changes. And what we will do is ZAF server to the disk folder. Alrighty, so now that we've gone ahead and done that, it should be visible in your Zendesk instance. Now, for this purposes of this walkthrough, we're not going to go ahead and do that. You can see again on the slide what you need to pop there. So say if you have it on the ticket sidebar, it's going to appear in the ticket sidebar all ready to go. Now, speaking of ticket sidebar, let's dive into locations. So now once we have the basic scaffolding set up for our app, we might want to change where the app will appear in our Zendesk instance. This can be done in the manifest.json file, which is found in the source directory. So essentially all we need to do is update the location object, which you can see here on the slide. Currently and by default, the location is set to ticket sidebar. The ticket sidebar value points to the iframe.html file from within your dist folder. As Erica will demonstrate later on, that can be changed, and it is something that frequently is changed depending on your circumstances. Now, there are a bunch of different location options available, a few of which we'll go over next. Also worth mentioning is that you're not just limited to using one location. You can have multiple locations working in conjunction with one another. But for the purposes of this walkthrough, we'll be sticking with just the one location, which will be... So we'll go on to the next slide. The ticket sidebar. Now, the ticket sidebar is actually one of the most widely used locations as it can be really versatile. And as I mentioned before, it's the default location when you create your app. Now, ticket sidebar apps are located in the right-hand side of the ticket pane, as you'll see here on the slide. That can be minimized or open depending on your user needs as well, so it's not taking up too much space. So along with other events and properties available to all locations, the ticket sidebar comes with access to specific ticket objects. So this allows you to get super granular with the ticket data. So with the ticket data made available to you, you can set fields and forms on a ticket, populate comments, assign tickets to agents, and a bunch more. Similarly, you can also pull data from your ticket into the app as well. So in this example that we have here, we have the knowledge capture app, which allows agents to gain access to their knowledge center directly from the ticket sidebar without having to leave the ticket. Agents can also populate knowledge center articles directly to the comment field from the app, or suggest changes to active articles based on ticket data. Super useful stuff. Now, the next one that we'll look at is the top bar. Now, this is the top bar, as you can see there on the top upper right-hand side. The top bar is another common location used by Zendesk apps. The top bar can be really handy when you want to have information presented to agents in a consistent, unobtrusive way across all pages. So as I mentioned, the top bar is located on the upper right-hand side, just next to the little icon for your profile there. Essentially, all you need to do is just click on the app icon to expand the app, and that will expand to the specifications that you've defined within your app. So in this specific example that we have here, we're looking at the notification app. Now, the notification app allows easy alerts to be sent to agents signed into your Zendesk account. So you can even share resources and files through the app, and that's going to be present. It doesn't matter what page your user is on, whether they're on a ticket, whether they're on a settings tab, that's always going to be available to pass on that important information to your agents. Again, super useful stuff for getting important messages out to agents quickly without disrupting their workflow. And last but not least, we have the background location. So this one is a bit different to the others in that it doesn't appear on the UI. It is always on, ready to receive events behind the scenes. So oftentimes the background location will be used together with other locations to add additional functionality to those locations. One example is opening a top bar app on page load. So by default, the top bar app is not initialized until an icon is clicked. So there would be no way of having this location open on page load independently. But since the background location is loaded immediately on page load, it can then be used together in conjunction with the top bar app to get the top bar app opening when the page is loaded. Now that's just one use case example. There's a bunch of others that we could be going into all day here. But the background app has access to objects available to all locations, as most other locations do. But in addition to the core events, the ticket.saved event is available to the background location as well. Now this gives the background app access to the ticket object of a specific ticket when that ticket is saved. And then essentially you can manipulate that data around however you like. If you have a data warehouse that you're wanting to send that information through to, the ticket.saved event allows you to do that. So again, a ton of different things that you can do with this particular location. It works really well together with other locations as well. But yeah, so that's the background app. So as I mentioned, again, there are a bunch of locations. We've just kind of scratched the surface here. The three that we've just covered here are some of the most commonly used. We'll definitely be going over other locations in future videos and webinars, so keep an eye out for that. But with that, I will pass off to Erica.
Thank you, Tiffany. So next up, now that we got that Zendesk app scaffold just up and running, we're going to go ahead and want to figure out how to integrate that with Next.js. So first things first, we're going to actually need to go back and make some changes to that Zendesk app. We're actually going to want to go ahead and delete the iframe. I know it sounds a little bit scary, but honestly, we're not going to need it. That's because our front end's actually going to live in our next app. So the other change that's going to need to be done is also in that manifest.json file, like T-Bene was saying. We're going to go ahead and change the assets /iframe.html to localhost 3000 with that / of whatever that location is that you have chosen for your app to be. This is just going to allow us to locally view and test our app, since when we run our next app server, that's where it's going to be living. So let's go ahead and show that in action here. So first, let's go ahead and delete our iframe. Here we go. Bye. Swear everything is fine, you guys. We're good to go. Next, we're going to go ahead and go in. So we have our manifest open here, and we're going to go ahead and just put in our local host. Let's see. Oops, that's not doing it. Cool. All right. Sorry. Okay. All right. So once you have that working, we're just going to go ahead and create our next app. I've already done that, as you might have kind of already saw in our VS Code, just to save some time for you guys. But we will be providing you guys any resources in case you guys actually haven't been through this process before in creating a next app. Essentially, you're just going to want to create its own directory and then run the script, one of the scripts that you see above here. All right, so let's go ahead and get into some of the heavier lifting. In our next app, we're going to go ahead and create your utils folder. And then in that utils folder, we're going to be creating a file in it, which is going to be holding the state of the client and the function to initialize it. So I already did that here. I can go ahead and show you. Let's see, utils, and then right here we just have, I just called it ZAF client.js, and this is where that very fun long function is going to go. So now, what on earth am I doing and what is actually happening here? Don't worry, we're going to go ahead and take it step by step, since this was honestly a huge learning curve for me in doing this. So I kind of want to make sure that everybody understands what it is that we're doing and how I came to this solution. Okay, so this is probably the most important thing to do. Initially, I had an issue with persisting state throughout my pages. I hadn't actually declared the ZAF client globally. It was actually here within my function. And what was happening was when I was actually doing those method calls later on the client, it just was not working. I was getting that dreaded client is undefined error, and it was just a disaster. So by going ahead and actually declaring it globally, we're making sure that all of our pages have access to it. And not only that, but you only really need to initialize it once. So let's go ahead and add that now. Next, we're just going to go ahead and set the initial value of the state. And we're, again, setting it to this ZAF client that we have already declared above here. So let's go ahead and plug that in as well. There we go. Next, wrapped in our lovely use effect, we're going to go ahead and check to see if the client already exists. And also just want to make sure that it's not undefined. So we're just going to go ahead and plug in this statement to check for that before we do any initializing. Cool. All right, next we're actually going to reassign that ZAF client variable to window.zapclient.init. Now the init method will actually return the client object, which will later allow you to make those various requests via methods such as get, set, invoke. Calling it from the window just allows us to make sure we're calling it within global scope. So let's go ahead and add that in as well. All right, let's go ahead and set the client state now. We're just going to go ahead and set the client state to ZAF client as seen above. After doing that, we want to be sure to also invoke it, as you can see down here, without passing any arguments into the invoke method. All we're doing is returning a promise of the client object itself. So let's go ahead and add that there too. Also, fun little tip, you can actually also set the size of your app within that invoke as well. So as you can see here, you just put in the resize, and then you can go ahead and you can set like your width and height. Obviously, it can be pixels, percentages, but I would also, depending on your applications, those size limitations are going to vary. So you might want to check the docs for more information as to what capabilities and what sizes you actually have within scope for your application. And last but not least, don't forget your dependency array. We just want to make sure that we only run this when there have been changes to the state of the client. So let's add that in here as well. Awesome. Okay, let's see. Okay, go to the next part. And then after that, we're just going to go ahead and we're going to want to import it into our pages. That's just basically going to be wherever you need to make requests to the client to be sure to import it directly into the page. And let's see here. And I am going to go ahead and I'm going to turn that sound off. So give me 1 second. I am so sorry, you guys. Give me 1 minute.
I just got to say, there's one thing about, like, it's one thing to like do a live product demo during an event because there's always a risk of like things not working. And I just want to say that doing live coding, during an event when like the tiniest typo or mistake can just mean nothing's going to work. Just major admiration to both of you, Erica and Tiffany, for doing that. I've done some coding myself, and I know how dicey that can be in the best of times when you're working by yourself. So doing it during this live event is amazing. Good job.
All right, thanks you guys. Sorry about that. Let's go ahead and get back to where we left off, which is honestly the last most exciting part. So like I was saying, we're gonna go ahead and you're just gonna import that ZAF client function that we just created, and we're gonna import it into any of the pages that we actually are gonna need to and do any of those methods, whether it's a get, set, invoke, or any sort of functionality where you're interacting with your Zendesk instance. And then after that, honestly, you're ready to go. You can go ahead and you can build out whatever else it is that you want to do with your fun new app. You're ready to go ahead and develop that in Next.js, as exciting as that is. And at a later point, we're going to go ahead and also release an article that's going to teach you how to deploy your newly shiny Next app. So keep an eye out for that. I want to say maybe sometime next week. But yeah, thank you guys for being so patient and walking through this with us.
All right. So is there more? So that's the presentation. Do you guys have time to answer some questions here? Oh, sorry, Eric, were you talking? It sounds like you were trying to talk.
Yeah, Eric, I think your mic's not working right now.
It's always the technical difficulties, isn't it?
There you go.
Awesome. Well, that brings us to the end of our presentation. I just want to say thank you to Erica and Tipene for doing some live coding here today, going through and giving you an understanding of getting started with Next, as well as trying to soldier on through that phone call there. As Dave said, it is always very daunting trying to live code, especially, with the, what do we have, 66 attendees here today, watching to make sure that you don't make any, typos or anything of that sort. So thank you both so much for that. We're now going to open the floor up to any questions that you have. As you guys saw, this is just getting you started with a boilerplate of Next.js within the ZAF framework. That was a redundancy there, but within ZAF. So any questions that you guys have about some of the use cases, some of the methods that you can use then, and some of the use cases you might have for using Next.js, we want to hear all of your guys' questions and be able to help you out however we can. So
yeah,
I'll leave
a reminder, please use the Q&A tab. It'll make it easier so that we won't have to scroll back up to find your questions. And it looks like we got a question already here. A question for Erica. Favorite Sailor Scout?
It was Sailor Mercury, but if I was 10 years old, I'd probably say Sailor Jupiter.
Excellent. And then a question from Chris. I may have missed it, but is there a repository for this project that's publicly available? Erica, I think you did share that earlier, right?
Yep, I dropped it into the chat window, but I'm also going to reply to the question here with it momentarily.
Great. Thanks for that question, Chris. Question from RC Maples. What are the benefits of using React or Next.js here instead of using a regular HTML and vanilla JavaScript in an iframe?
Definitely. I'm happy to answer that question. So first off, React is a very, very well-used front-end library throughout the JavaScript world. Next.js is a framework that we have that is built upon React. And some of the really big benefits that you have with Next.js is the ability to explicitly state if it's going to be client-side or if it's going to be server-side. So this allows for you to have like a higher level of security by being able to have all of your API functions and everything running in the backend. And the only thing that's getting presented out to the user is like a view or something. This also allows for you to be able to host this somewhere else. So let's say that you're an enterprise company that is wanting to build a Zendesk app to be able to be utilized throughout the Zendesk world and everything, and you want to have a database of users to be able to pull information from or something. This would allow you to have that and have all of that running server side So you have much quicker response times, data resiliency, as well as data security.
Awesome. Thanks, Eric. And thanks for that question. A question from Chris Edge Alexander. When is ZAT support for M1 chips expected?
Great question, Chris. So with ZAT, we are currently in a maintenance mode for it. We are actively working on building out the ZCLI, which is going to be a new and improved version of ZAT that is built within the JavaScript world. So it's going to be an NPM package that you'll be able to install globally and use everywhere. It is currently in beta, but with that, we are not doing any active new features or active new developments to be able to support the M1 chip within ZAT. The ZCLI, though, will be fully available and functional with the M1 chip.
Awesome. A question from Timur. I want to try to get this right here. Wondering if we could somehow locate an app or icon on the left sidebar or right in the input field next to formatting text and the attachment buttons. Is that possible?
It's a great question. If you wouldn't mind providing a little bit more of clarification, Timur, of just what your use case is, I'd be happy to answer that.
Cool. And while we're waiting for that, a question from Colin. Are there big differences between ZAT and ZCLI to be aware of? Not sure when the right time to switch is.
Another great question here. So the difference between ZAT and ZCLI is mainly when it comes to, and apologies, it looks like somebody's audio is on. No worries. Alrighty. There's a difference between ZAT and ZCLI is with ZAT, it is built within Ruby and has a lot of complications with the Windows environment. ZCLI, because it's built in JavaScript as well as going to be hosted through NPM, is going to be available for all Linux, Mac OS, as well as Windows machines without any complications. Some of the additional features that come with the ZCLI as well are being able to have a much more verbose connection into your Zendesk instance. So some of those examples are being able to build into like a CI pipeline or something much easier. So you could use GitHub Actions to deploy or push your app up into GitHub and then have it deploy from there out into your Zendesk instance, as well as you have a lot more availability to be able to pull in information through the ZCLI to preload into your application. And the final thing that I'll really mention here is today, we went through and talked about, Next.js, which is a React-based framework. There is a React scaffold that is really available within the ZCLI. So a lot of the work that we did here today, we've taken care of for you, and you will be able to just spin up a boilerplate of a React-based application by using the ZCLI.
Awesome. Thanks, Colin. And Timur, if you do have any more information about your use case, what you would be looking to do with adding an app or icon into the left sidebar or into that input field, do let us know. You can add another question in there or type it into the chat window, either way, and so that we can better answer that. Let's see, that one answered. From Justin, when do you expect the official release of ZCLI, and will you provide written tutorials and documentation as the same that you have for ZAT?
Definitely. So first, we aren't going to be able to give you like a absolute date on when that ZCLI is going to be coming into, out of beta into an open release. But it is going to be in the very near future. We're working out some kinks with it, with some of the login flows and a few of other pieces. And we want to make sure that what we're putting out is like top notch for when we put it out into open availability. Now, when I say open availability, I mean like active release. We have a team built around it that's actively supporting it and stuff as what, and that is their duties. In comparison to right now, as it is an open beta, it's more of a fun project that a bunch of us internally here are working on and are trying to get it into the right place and work out all of the kinks before we move it into having an actual Scrum team dedicated to it. As regards for written tutorials, documentation, etc., what a great question and a great segue into talking about what we here in developer support and advocacy do. We will be the main team that will be building out that documentation, those how-tos, and giving you a great understanding of how to best utilize the ZCLI going forward. So be on the lookout for that documentation. We will be putting out some posts in the community, as well as sending some stuff to our developer community, letting everyone know when that gets moved, as well as when we publish those articles that correspond with it.
Awesome. Thanks. And thanks, Justin, for that question. Another question from Chris Edge Alexander. Love ZCLI. Glad that it's moving forwards. Is guide theme development support coming to ZCLI? Missing that in the beta so far.
I couldn't agree more. I'll start with that and say that it's something that we are scoping. And the main thing that we are trying to figure out with that is the best way of offering like a scaffolding or boilerplate guide theme to be able to be within the ZCLI. That's something that takes a lot of work and a lot of cross collaboration between teams. So it's something that currently we're in the scoping phase of, but we haven't started active development on.
Awesome. Awesome. And from Daniel, will the developer exam questions change with these new updates, or will they stay the same?
Some of them will change. Any of them that are talking about some of our pre-existing Zendesk app tools would be getting changed here, but not anytime in the near future, as we aren't trying to say, here, you have to know everything on some bleeding edge technology that we've just built or something. So those will be coming most likely in about a year's time, but we will be sending out notifications to our users and letting know in the release notes of that, of the different questions and the topics that will be getting covered under that exam.
Awesome. Timur, thanks, Timur, for your follow-up to your question here. So some context. So basically, we have 3 sections on the page. The left bar, where the brand, tags, etc. are situated. The central section, where the conversation history is. And then the right bar, where the other apps are. I'm just wondering if we can locate our app on the left bar under the tags field, or next to the formatting and attachment buttons in the central section. I'm just asking purely out of UX interest.
Yep. Yes, is the simple question for it. Just due to timing and having to talk through it and stuff, Timur, I'll be following up with you after this webinar today with some resources that'll be available that go over those different locations and the ability for you to be able to change it so that it can live within like the text, like within the left sidebar, or within the application tool set for the ticket comments and ticket fields.
Awesome, awesome. Quick question from Sandesh, who joined us partway through. Yes, Sandesh, we will have a recording for this event, so you'll get a link to that recording automatically, and eventually we'll also process this recording and post it to our YouTube channel as well. And then a question from Colin. Are there common issues that come up during app review? I think you mentioned Garden makes that smoother. Wondering if there are any other pitfalls that they should be aware of.
Definitely. I'll say that the main thing that we see is people not making their applications accessible. Here at Zendesk, we try our utmost to be able to be inclusive of all people. So accessibility is a top priority. And that is a big part of our app review process. So making sure that your app is accessible by using ARIA labels and things of that nature will really help you to cruise through it quickly. That's a great question, though. And I think that it's a takeaway for us to be able to put together a couple of tips and tricks for how to get your app through the app review process a little bit quicker. So we'll be taking that away as a content idea. Awesome.
Awesome. Tobias has a question. Is there some way to restart an app that has timed out, i.e. 20 plus apps running on an instance without refreshing Zendesk?
It's a great question. Yes, is the simple question simple answer for it. But it's going to be custom code related. So setting a timeout onto the application, as well as a custom feature for a refresh button to reset that timeout feature. So clearing the local cache of it, rebuilding the application there in window. You'll often see that in some of our Zendesk Marketplace apps that are built by Zendesk. I can't think of one off the top of my head, but I'll follow up with you after that, after this, with a couple of sample apps that have that feature built into it.
Awesome. We've got a question from Leonardo. How long does the review process take if everything runs smoothly?
You know, that's a wonderful question. It's all based on how many apps we have brought in for review and at what time. Just like any business, we have a lot of ebbs and flows. Depending on that, it is all based on availability of our teams to be able to review the apps to make sure that they pass everything from code resiliency, accessibility standards, and just like general best practices. Making sure you're not doing anything sketchy, or your app's going to break once you try to scale to like 100+ people. So that takes time, and unfortunately, I can't give you like a good barometer on that because it's all based on how many of those reviews that we have in the pipeline.
Awesome, thanks. Another question from Chris Edge Alexander. Any news on Zendesk integration services that you can share, and will that be supported in ZCLI in the future as well?
That's a great question, Chris, and that gives me a chance to do some cross promotion to another event that we have that's going to be happening at the end of the month. So on August 31st, we are going to be having another webinar about ZAF and ZCLI, and it's going to be a much more broad what's happening in those worlds, what do we have coming down the pipeline, and that roadmap. So be on the lookout for the invite to that, as well as the documentation that we'll be having coming out following that.
Great. A question from Brian Ulmer. I develop in a Windows 10 environment. The installation of the ZAF environment was painful, and I had to get NetOps involved to finish the install. Will you be improving the install process so that when I upgrade to a new computer, the next install goes smoother?
Yes. Brett, I'm assuming you are referring to ZAT or ZAF? So the application tool or the application framework? No worries. Question from Brian Ulmer. Apologies, I didn't read the first part of it. So that's the main question that I have. So with ZAF, you shouldn't be having any issues, as it's just an SDK that's getting loaded into the client side and then being able to work from there. So I'm going to assume that you're talking about ZAT. As I spoke about a little bit earlier, ZAT is built in Ruby, which is native to Mac OS as well as Linux. But has some complications when it comes to Windows environments. Due to that, that is why we are pushing out the ZCLI, because that is going to give you a lot more flexibility when it comes to Windows 10 environments.
Cool. And folks, yeah, just try to use the Q&A tab there to ask your questions. It does make it a little bit easier for us to track. Another question from Colin. Does the ZAF client allow access to triggering the new webhooks in the admin center in support?
Yes. I can't, it's any of our available core APIs or extended APIs are available from within the ZAF client. Great thing about doing it from within that is that because the authentication has already happened and that connection is already approved, that you don't have to be doing any more authentication methods, whether it be through basic, JWT, OAuth, or API token. So you can just do the call from there. It is the same endpoints as what are available currently for targets, though.
Cool. Colin added a little bit more context, which maybe you covered this. He just said that we have a lot of apps that post data to the same endpoints with the same credentials, so it'd be good to manage centrally. It sounds like not having to authenticate every time will help with that. Definitely,
and that's the real benefit of using ZAF Client, is to be able to interact with your own Zendesk instance to make changes to tickets, ticket fields, user profiles, things of that sort, is a much easier process because you're calling the APIs directly instead of trying to thread them through targets to get to that end location.
Awesome. We've got another question from Timur. Another question regarding the Zendesk stack. As far as I remember, there's also Ruby support. For example, regex fields are using Ruby syntax. Just to get it clear, since we can only use JavaScript for apps, what would we use Ruby for?
Yeah, so you actually don't have to just use JavaScript for apps. You just have to use it for the presenting and of the view portion. Very similar to how like any MVC language set works, like Ruby on Rails. You would just be handling the view portion with a JavaScript-based framework or just straight HTML, honestly. That backend can be whatever you want, Python, or Django. Ruby on Rails, whatever you want, PHP, it doesn't really matter to us. You just have to be passing us that information to be able to be ingested via the view, which is in this case JavaScript or HTML.
Awesome. Thanks for that question. And a question from Alfredo Navarro. Will ZCLI be bound only to Next.js, or will I have the option to not use that and stay in plain JavaScript?
You can use plain Jane JavaScript. You can use Next. You can use any Vue.js. You can use anything that you want. The only thing that we are offering at this moment, though, with the ZCLI is the standard scaffolding option, which will give you the same kind of functionality that ZAF offers today, which is just a blank scaffold using iframe to be able to present present your application, or a React frame scaffold, which then allows you to use a React. I believe it's Create React App is what it's based off at this moment, to be able to build it. But you can use Next, you can use Gatsby, you can use whatever you want. We don't care.
Yeah, and Emily posted in the main chat that she's written an app for their team with Vue.
Wonderful. I love Vue.
Cool. That's all the questions that we have. I'll give a last call for any other questions. Otherwise, we'll say goodbye for today. Thank you so much, everybody, for all of these really great questions. And Eric, just really on the ball with your answers off the top of your head.
No worries.
You three all are clearly very knowledgeable about this subject.
Thanks so much for having us. This was really impactful for us as a team. We'd love to get your feedback. So feel free to jump out into the community to ask any questions that you have. Our team spends a majority of our time there interacting with you, and us learning in public as well as you learning in public. So feel free to reach out to us there, and thank you again, everyone.
Sure. Yeah, and thank you everyone for attending. I'm posting the registration link for next week's events, which is all Q&A. So if you have deeper questions, if you're trying some of this stuff out and you run into some issues, or you want to dive a little bit deeper, I think next week will be a great week to do that. And also just a reminder that we do have developer topics in the Zendesk community, where these three and their team can answer your developer questions there in a public forum. And also you can answer each other's questions as well, and really support each other's work and development and growth. So we really encourage you to hit up the community as well for all of your Zendesk questions, whether developer or product related, or even best practices. So thanks everybody for joining us, and maybe we'll see you next week for the Q&A event. And have a great rest of your day, a great rest of your evening for those of you who stayed up late with us. And look for the recording link. We'll get that out to you as soon as we can. Bye, everybody.